Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 23rd Annual SF Indie Fest. We're excited to have you here. Obviously, when we started this film festival, we imagined everything live and would be sitting in the Roxy eating popcorn. Obviously, the world's gone to a little bit topsy-turvy since then, and we're here in this virtual environment. So thanks again for joining us. We have a really wonderful documentary that you just saw, Playing for Keeps by James Redford. Unfortunately, soon after finishing this film, Jamie had passed away, and that's just a sad time for obviously his family, but also just the kind of independent film community at large. For those of you in the Bay Area film community, you know how much Jamie gave, not just in his own creative works, but supporting so many other great documentaries and films out there over the years. So while we're not able to have Jamie here today, we have cinematographer John Behrens. Welcome, John. And we have both Caroline and Stuart Brown from that are participants in the film to kind of participate in the Q&A. So thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So maybe a good place to start is, how did each of you get involved in the project, and what kind of made you excited to kind of help kind of share this story about the kind of importance of relaxation and play? John, you want to start?
Sure. I was the cinematographer for Playing for Keeps, and I've been working with Jamie Redford for about 10 years, shooting his films, parts of or all of some of his films. And the idea of making a film about play came up, and I thought that was a brilliant idea because I feel like the work that making films when you're really in your flow is a lot like play. And I also love to play at work and not at work. So the idea was super exciting to me to go find everybody's play stories and tell them, and then to learn as much as we did from Stuart Brown about what the physiology of play is.
Yeah, and Stuart, so you're kind of had founded the kind of National Institute for Play. Is that correct?
That's right.
So when what came first, the idea for the documentary, or had Jamie met you in a different capacity based on what you had going on already?
I'm not sure what alerted him to me, but I got a phone call from him kind of out of the blue, and it was clear he was very personable, and we had probably a half-hour discussion, during which time it was obvious to me that he was curious, wanted to understand more about play at the time, and was very open to kind of the pedantic science that plagues my life as a part of me. And I thought, well, this sounds like it's going to be fun. And then, of course, he and the crew showed up at my house, and we had a couple of very good days. And what was fascinating to me while he and the crew were here is I wanted, I kind of wanted to get the word about the importance of play across. He really wanted to see if it was for real and if I could play. And so he followed me on my bicycle into my heckle all my friends at a tennis club. And that was delightful from my standpoint. And I grew very fond of him and certainly miss his participation in this discussion today.
And Caroline, how did serendipity kind of get you involved in the film? If I remember correctly, you're an oncology nurse and also have the love for the hula hoop.
Yeah, so I'm an oncology nurse, and I wrote my master's thesis on hoop dancing to prevent burnout and compassion fatigue among nurses. And I had been following Dr. Stuart Brown's work after I had read his book, Play, How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination, and Invigorates the Soul. And I sent Dr. Stuart Brown an email when I decided to go after my doctorate degree in psychology and write my dissertation on play. And Dr. Stuart Brown and I have created a really fun relationship. We had a chance to meet and really dive into deep discussions around this phenomenon of play and how incredibly powerful and transformational it is, and how we're really true advocates for it. And when Jamie decided that he was going to do a film about this phenomenon of play, Dr. Brown said, hey, you know, you ought to speak to this oncology nurse down in San Diego. She teaches hula hooping to nurses down there. And he called me. And we had about a 45-minute conversation about life and quality of life and death and love and play and the importance of relationships between humans. And I mean, we went everywhere in the conversation, so it was clear that we were both really comfortable being in conversation about this topic and also with one another, and being playful in that. But I could tell that he was very much serious about really trying to understand the phenomenon of play. And I felt honored that both Stuart Brown would plant that seed and that Jamie would consider me to be in the film.
Cool. And, you know, this question's for all three of you, but maybe more focused on Caroline and Stuart, is, you know, I wonder, like, in being based in California, right? I might kind of take it for granted that the idea is like that intuitively this all makes sense, right? And, you know, for those, you know, whether they be Californians or elsewhere that might be skeptical about this idea that, like, oh, it's just this kind of, you know, feel good idea, you know, versus the practicality, like how, you know, when anybody presents some sort of skepticism, what's the kind of anecdote that you kind of share with them to kind of encourage them to kind of maybe open their mind and recognize the importance of play?
Well, from my standpoint, all you have to do is talk to somebody for a few minutes and find out when they did something that gave them great glee, when they felt like they were outside of time, and do they have a dog? And if so, do they play with their dog? Do they have kids? And if they have kids, what's the essence of the driving force within the kid? So pretty soon people begin to recognize that play itself is a part of all of us, really significant. And, you know, so I'll stop there and pass the baton to Caroline.
Oh, I could just hear you speak for hours, Dr. Brown. He has so much knowledge on this subject. Well, he says that play is a state of being. So to try and understand it from a cognitive perspective and to look at it from a lens of, oh, well, that's easy for you to say, you live over there. Life is might, you know, that's what you guys do over there or something. Play isn't that. Play is a state of being. It's an experiential process, and the player defines what play is. And the hallmark of play is that it's frivolous. What it yields is so much more. But the focus of play is not on what it yields. The focus of it is on its means and its experiential process and what it does for you in the moment, which basically is something that evokes joy. And joy is a basic affect in every human being. And it serves in allowing us to relax and restore. And it is a portal into our imagination, which is vital, you know, it's one of our most powerful capacities. So it's not just something that some people do, it's innate in every single one of us.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You know, I think this film's kind of come around at the right time in the sense that, you know,
Yes.
Many of us obviously have a lot of opportunity to reflect and consider what's important for life, but also ways that we can kind of adapt and be happy. Before I kind of shift things to the pandemic, you know, John, maybe you can kind of, you know, given your long-standing relationship with Jamie, as you kind of started filming some of these vignettes and stories, like, can you kind of share a little bit more like what Jamie's curiosity and vision for the film was? And also, there's so many different activities here, you know, what was the kind of visual aesthetic and approach that you brought to kind of trying to capture these things, you know, whether it be a hula hoop dancer or, you know, somebody skirting around on the skates? I mean, it seemed like it was, you know, just a carnival of all kinds of visual things that you could kind of explore and capture.
Well, yeah, first of all, I would describe Jamie as a very, very playful, innately curious guy. And he was wonderful to work with because it really was a very playful, exploratory process. And it was always, he was always looking for the silver lining, even in the darker stories that he told. And with play, it was actually kind of a treat to be looking at mostly the light side and saying, yeah, play deprivation is a big problem that we all experience, but let's spend the movie talking about all the fun play that people do. And that was a great experience for me because I do the play that I do, and I, play around I have a child and I love animals and I do the things that I do to play. But, and Jamie himself was a musician, played in a band, loved playing music, seen him play. He was a guitarist and he would be off riffing and you could just tell he was in the flow and he enjoyed that immensely. And I think the process, as filmmakers, to go explore everyone else's play that we visited and spend a day in their shoes, to hula hoop with Caroline or to roller skate and with Paul, it was pretty powerful. And to try to figure out how to move the camera in a playful way that really shows what it's like to be there, not just this sort of observant sort of proscenium framing, but to actually have the camera be as close and in it as we could. With Caroline, we sat in the middle of the circle with all of her and her ladies hula hooping around us, and we tried to be wandering and being around and if we could have made the camera hula hoop. We even tried putting a camera on the hula hoop, but that was causing people to get ill. And with roller skating, actually, our sound guy, Adriano, was an amazing rollerblader. And I handed him the movie, and he actually did a whole bunch of the skate footage that you see at the Church of Eight Wheels. And Jamie and I were on the sidelines looking at the wireless, pulling focus and just laughing. It really felt like we were there. We were actually being in the place, dancing or hula hooping or skating or... so the process was great, and we tried to make it as first person as we could. And I feel like I learned a lot more about play for myself as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think in watching the film, it kind of puts you in the moment. And as we all, I think, knows that when you see people enjoying themselves, it's very contagious, and I think you did a good job of kind of capturing that feeling. So obviously we're kind of in the middle of the pandemic, and one of the things that I know, Dr. Brown, that you kind of had looked at is just like how important it is for play to kind of help people adapt and be resilient. And I think there's nothing quite like the last year that requires adaptation and resilience. So, how have all three of you kind of embraced some of the ideas shared in the film during this last year and kind of maintain your sanity? And how has the pandemic gone for all three of you?
Well, I'll start out and say it's a lot more lonesome non-traveling and not seeing my kids and grandkids, but there are some upsides. And, I just had a call from Austin, Texas about an hour ago, and somebody without power complaining that they were bitterly cold and what could they do? And I said, well, imagine you're a penguin and except really get enough clothes on and go on outside and waddle around. I don't know if that works or not, but there is this capacity, I think, that we all have, even when we're challenged. And when mothers are going nuts with two kids in their virtual school and plus their own work, what do? Well, it's really important to prioritize the playtime for the kids and themselves. It's to me a public health necessity. So the pandemic is not going to be over anytime immediately soon. It's a challenge for all of us, but we still got our play nature. And one of the things that caught my attention in the study of play, particularly early, was that many times people in some of the most difficult circumstances, when they establish humor and playfulness, it gets them through some of their worst times. So it's appropriate and significant and part of what is in us to cope with a challenging world for sure.
I can definitely see that. We have a lot of films that we watch over the course of programming for a film festival, and I think some of them, the films that have people that enjoy life the most and have kind of a sense of humor, are often the ones that are dealing with difficult circumstances and have kind of find a way to kind of embrace the things in life that they appreciate and want to do. How about you, Caroline? Has the pandemic affected you in any sort of way, or how have you kind of figured out a way to bring some of the techniques that you use with other nurses to kind of deal with the stress of being in a health situation like this?
Well, yeah. So I've actually taught some hula hoop virtual classes, and I piloted a project. I'm actually writing my dissertation right now. So, and I'm a mother to almost a 2-year-old. So, I've got 50 hula hoops here in my backyard. And so how do I take care of myself in a time when I'm feeling some of the unique challenges that affect us in this pandemic? Well, I hula hoop, I play with my baby. We go outside and we wander around in nature, and I try to dive into how she sees the world, because her imagination is so wide and pristine and so non-conditioned, so non-influenced by so much of the world. And that allows me to see her perspective, which brings me into a sense of wonder. To jump in here on the part where Stuart Brown was talking about, this capacity of our imagination, it actually nurtures our flexibility, our endurance, and our patience. And it's a necessary capacity to continue to pay attention to and to cultivate, because it nurtures the parts about us that we need when we go through challenging times. It's not a select few of us that get to experience joy. It's a birthright. And it's there to both restore and help relax us in these kinds of moments. And it is a portal to our imagination, our playful state.
Very much concur there. And how about you, John? Obviously, making films have changed a little bit during the pandemic, and I know you have a kind of a family home. How have you kind of embraced the theme of playing for keeps during the pandemic?
Well, it's been very hard on the film industry because I, went from being very busy making several films to slowing way down until everyone figured out how we could work safely during the pandemic. I have to say the sad thing is it's taken a lot of the play out of work, because when we're stressed, we have a harder time playing. But in my home life, I have a 5-year-old and she's extremely playful. And I feel like, if anything, what I've noticed about myself and so many of my friends is we're outside even more than we ever were before. So just today, we took my daughter and her school friend to the beach. We went and kayaked and played around in the sand and ate lunch on a beach, and came back just in time to do this. And we're constantly outside, figuring out how to play outside, how to be outside. And that immediately reconnects us to our playful selves and to nature. So I feel like on that side of things, it's been a real positive.
Great.
Yeah. And sometimes the difficulties is kind of given us these other gifts. So, as we wrap up, what is it that you might want to kind of leave the audience, with, after they've seen this film? Like, what do you think Jamie would want them to do, or kind of like, this isn't a teachable documentary. Hopefully, I think it's an inspirational documentary, but like, if there was something that Jamie would kind of encourage folks to do, or you guys personally, would you like to share that kind of as our parting words?
Sure. I think the actual experience that one has of true and real authentic play for themselves produces empathy and cooperation and a sense of belonging to community, so that the outgrowth of a film like this, if it gives more permission for the people who watch it to play themselves in an authentic way, I think the ramifications of that for a better society are profound. And I think Jamie would like to see that as a result, one of the results of this film. And I think that was his genius in part was, hey, we're going to show what it is to experience play. Don't just talk about it, which is a lot what I do. And he was good at rounding up people like Caroline and John. You did a great job here. It was great. So that's more than 2 cents.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you all for not only participating and helping make this film, but carrying on Jamie's spirit of generosity by joining us here for the Q&A, and for all of those that just watch this movie. Why don't you get outdoors and play in the way that most inspires and that you enjoy. So thank you again, everybody, and thanks again for being part of SF Indie Fest.
Thanks for having us. Go find your play.
Yeah.